Hello, and welcome to the Weird and Wonderful World of Children, a collaboration between Baby Brains and the Developmental and Educational Science Group at Goldsmith University. Today, here with us is Dr. Evelyne Mercure. Welcome, Evelyne.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being here today and closing the series for this year. We're really excited to hear about what you've learned from your experience and your work with the deaf population and other type of atypical population. So without further ado, I will put your slides on and we can't wait to listen to what you have to tell us today.
Great. Thank you very much for the introduction. So, as Sylvia said, I'm going to talk about a population that not a lot of researchers have been working with, which is the children with deaf parents. So if a child has deaf parents, if they are a hearing child, for example, with deaf parents, they're likely to be exposed to both a sign language, like British Sign Language or American Sign Language, as well as a spoken language, such as English, for example. And this experience starts from birth. So in that respect, they are experiencing a very special case of bilingualism, which we are calling bimodal bilingualism, because one of the language is a visual language, so it's in the visual modality, and the other one is a mainly audio language in the auditory modality. So that's why we call them bimodal bilinguals. And while I was reading about the babies with deaf parents, it became obvious that the deaf parents were facing some prejudice some of the time with their children. And for example, in a paper from 2014, it was said that one of the co-authors, being a clinician in the Washington district area, having had 20 years experience of working with children with deaf parents, said that there was a systematic referral to speech and language therapy if the parents were being deaf. So if we're thinking of as these children as children who are acquiring two languages, as bilingual children, it is really unusual for a systematic referral of children to a speech and language therapist or any kind of therapist just because they're experiencing two languages. Something that we might have seen in the past, that kind of prejudice, that kind of assumption that there's something that needs to be done. But in the case of spoken language bilingualism, it's no longer the case that the kids are assumed to be at risk. It seems that at least in 2014, some of this perception was still existing, at least in some parts of the world. We've also done a parental survey recently with deaf parents, asking them about their experiences in the world. So these are parents living in the UK and the United States and Canada mainly, who have at the moment children who are under 18 years of age. And some of the parents were also reporting facing some prejudice, some difficulties with people understanding their child's experiences. So for example, this mother here is expressing a lack of recognition of their child's bilingualism, which was reflected in a lot of comments from a lot of deaf parents. So mom was saying, I placed my son in daycare at age 2. They reported concern of him not talking at age level, even though he used ASL being American Sign Language. It became clear that the daycare did not realize ASL is a language because they were focusing on the fact he was not using English. So it's the kind of prejudice that bilingual children were experiencing in the past, and it might still be in place in a lot of places for deaf children. And other deaf parents expressed some experience of discrimination. So here she said, some felt that I should not be left alone with my children, which is a very strong statement. all were most concerned about hearing issues and that they're not speaking well enough or similar. While I have a degree in linguistics and no child development in sign languages, they believe I'm ignorant. So a mother who feels that she's not being taken seriously. And a mother who also expresses that other people have concern about her children that she does not necessarily share. So I think a lot of this prejudice comes from the fact that we know very little about this population. And so I have been really interested in gathering more data about the development of babies with deaf parents from very early on, all the way into childhood. And I have found some interesting things. I'm not going to present everything. I've been working with this population for 12 years. So just a few snapshots of things that I think are interesting. So one of the things we did was with the babies when they were in the lab, we did a developmental assessment with them. So this is called the Mullen Scales of Early Learning. So it's a series of games that you do with babies to assess different aspects of their development. And when we first saw the test, I was thinking, this is really designed with hearing babies of hearing parents in mind. Some of the tasks may not be so appropriate for babies with deaf parents because deaf parents may communicate differently. But I thought, okay, let's run the scale. We'll probably find that they underperform. We'll probably have to say that the test is not appropriate. But let's see what happens. And I'm really happy that we did, because we found exactly the opposite. So the babies with deaf parents here were better than the babies with monolingual and bilingual hearing parents when it came to measuring receptive language skills. And it seems that if a child has experience of interacting with deaf people, then interacting with hearing people, it makes them a little more aware of people's communicative needs, and it makes them more mature in their interaction. Then if we fast forward a little bit in time, when the babies were at 2 years of age, we measured their vocabulary. We did that in English and in British Sign Language. This is done with a checklist where parents tick words that and signs that their child understands and says. And here what we can see on this graph is that, so this is looking at English vocabulary alone. So if we're looking at monolingual babies compared to unimodal bilingual babies, you can see that the monolinguals know more words in English than the bilinguals. This is something that we've seen a lot in research, because these babies also know words in English or in Italian, in Italian or in Spanish or in another language that are not captured by this test. But what's interesting here is that the babies with deaf parents are sitting really nicely between the monolinguals and the other bilinguals, which suggests that for babies who are learning 2 languages, they are learning English especially well. So this is very reassuring for this population. We also saw the children, I should say now, when they were in school age years, did a lot of direct assessment with them on Zoom, over the internet. And one thing that we did was to evaluate their vocabulary again. So we evaluated their English vocabulary and found something very similar to what we found at age 2. That their English vocabulary was sitting between monolinguals and unimodal bilinguals. But we also did a thing where for each item, so we were presenting something like this here and saying, what is this animal called? And regardless of their answer or not in English, we were also asking, do you know this word or this sign in, and then we would state the child's other language. And when we measured total vocabulary in this way, we found that the bimodal bilinguals were better than the other groups. So it suggests, again, something very healthy in the profile of language development in these babies. And that reminds me of the study of Atsushi Senju and colleagues that he carried at Backpack with sighted babies with blind parents. And using the Mullen scales of early learning that I presented earlier, Atsushi and colleagues found that the sighted babies were actually better. So sighted babies with blind parents were actually better than sighted babies with sighted parents at visual processing tasks. So these are tasks like finding a toy that is hidden under a blanket and that kind of thing. So that suggests again that this adaptability, this flexibility that is required of a baby who's interacting with a blind person and then interacting with a sighted person can be very beneficial to the child's development. So if we're trying to bring all of that together with a few take-home messages for parents, I think it's very important to remember that children can thrive in various environments. So we're sometimes trying to find the perfect environment, the perfect setup for a child, but we have to remember that this can be, there's no perfect environment, basically. So a child can take advantage and make some learning in very different environment. Another point is that a need for flexibility, a need for adaptability from the baby can actually be a real boost to development for the child. So if we think of babies interacting with deaf and hearing communication partners, or with blind and sighted communication partners, it can really create more maturity at some level in the child that needs for flexibility. So for these reasons, I think we should really avoid seeing any situation in black and white or white terms. So this is something that we've seen, for example, in bilingualism. So for a long time, people were saying, oh, bilingualism is really bad for the child. And then at one point, it flipped all the way around with, oh, bilingualism can make your child smarter. I don't think it's very helpful to see situations like these, because I think in any situation, a child can learn something, but also there might be a negative side effect. So if the child is investing in something, there might be something else they're not learning, for example. So everything is about adaptability, the child making sure that they're fitting in their environment. So nothing is really fully black or white. And I think for me, one example of this is a time where I realized this as a mother was during the COVID pandemic. So when we went into lockdown, my husband and I were working from home. We were working really a lot in that period. We had 3 children behind us doing not very much. There was not very much home learning provided by the school. They were not seeing their friends. And at the beginning, I spent a lot of time worrying about the impact, the negative impact that period would have on my children. And I'm not saying that the whole thing was a positive experience, but there were some really, really positive things that came out of that period. One example of that is my eldest daughter, who was 10 years old when we went into lockdown. She really learned to cook because we were so busy. So she learned to cook for the family. She learned to be more independent, more responsible, to contribute a little bit more to the family life. So that was a real positive for her. My middle daughter spent, I have no idea how many hours or how many days building a city in Lego. And I mean like a mammoth of a city with pages and pages of notes about each child in the city. They had parents. So one parent was working as a hairdresser, the other one was working in the flower shop. Everybody had a name, relationship, etc. So this is the kind of magic that can really happen in a time of boredom. So a positive that came out of the COVID pandemic. And my youngest daughter also, I think it was very difficult for her to not get instruction. She really needed that time with a teacher, learning to read and write. But on the other hand, I know she benefited a lot from spending more time with her older sisters. So even though all three of my kids, they missed their friends, they missed school and all of this, there was some positive in that situation for every one of them. So all that to say about trying to see situations for what they are, with the positive and the negative, and not trying to say, oh, this is catastrophic or this is wonderful. And my other point is about another thing that I've also learned from my research, but also as a mother. And I think when my kids were a bit younger, I had that idea that I was supposed to help my kids with everything, that I would, that I needed to be fantastic at everything. And then after seeing my kids get a bit older, I just let go of this idea, and I think it's really helpful. And I think it's helpful to focus on transmitting your core values, the things you're good at, the activities that are dear to you, your language, and also accept that your child will learn other things from other people. So, for example, for me, I decided very early on that I would speak French with my kids and would trust that they will learn English from other people in their lives. And it did happen. English became their dominant language through schools, friends, teachers, etc. So you can also trust that children learn other things from other people. It takes away some of the pressure, I would say.
Absolutely.
So that's all I had to say for today.
Thank you so much, Evelyne. Thank you. It's a really it's wonderful. It's very inspiring, and I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of a free association, but it's kind of linked to the last thing that you were saying, that seeing how children of parents that cannot do something, that lack a skill, they just that skill is completely blocked for them. They seems to compensate almost for the lack of their parents, and kind of be even better than average on that. I don't know, it's just a speculation, it's not a scientific thing, but it seems inspiring in the sense that if I think about myself and where I fall short, my senses all work, but then there are plenty of other things that then don't work quite well. And as you were saying, I feel guilty very often. I think, oh, poor children, they get this horrible now some days. And on the other hand, it's nice to think, well, where I fall short, it's actually an opportunity for them to excel at that thing, to compensate. Of course, it should never be an excuse to say, oh, well, I just sit back and relax and I have no work to do as a parent. That's not what I'm saying. But when we feel that pressure, that pressure that, as you were saying, we should be like give everything to our children. Mm-hmm. But actually, whatever we don't give, it's an opportunity for them to go get it for themselves and learn skills through that.
Yes, and I think that they can be quite creative, quite flexible and adaptive in finding solutions to learn what they want to learn if it's not from their primary caregivers. Like a very down-to-earth example for me, I don't know why, but I don't enjoy playing with Legos. I'm not very creative with them. I don't know how people can have such wonderful ideas of how to assemble plastic blocks together. I just don't have it. And at the beginning, when my kids were younger, I knew they had an interest in playing with Legos, and I was thinking, okay, let's develop this in myself so I can transmit it. But it's not my passion. It's not my thing. And the kids are fine. They get that with their dads. It becomes their special thing that they do together. I don't need to be in that. As long as you find that there are things that you enjoy doing with your kids, that you skills that you enjoy working with your kids, or activities, it doesn't need to be everything.
Yes. Yes, and I think as well, as long as you acknowledge that they like something, because sometimes maybe there might be also an attitude whereby you say, oh, they like Lego, I don't like Lego, so I still don't buy many Lego, I don't kind of put it in there. It's nice to see it, to acknowledge it, and you don't necessarily need to be part of it, really. But I think, yeah, that it's important to, sometimes it's more difficult to see and appreciate skills or interests or capacities that are not the ones that make our hearts vibrate. So it's important to have this wide lens on who our kids are, basically.
Yes, yeah, I think so.
Mm-mm. Yeah, yeah. I think this is really, really exciting, and really helpful for parents. In any situation, we asked our followers how they see their children, whether they see them as normal, like, or whether they felt they were mainly normal with some atypical traits, whether they were pretty different from their peers or 100% atypical. And from our sample, we have 67% normal children and 33% of children that are defined by their parents are pretty different from their peers. So it's interesting because one of the questions that we get asked quite a lot at Baby Brains, with a certain amount of worry, is it normal that something? Like, it seems that as parents, we are very concerned that our kids are normal. And it seems that most of your kids then in the end you consider them normal. So it can be reassuring in one way. In the other way, maybe it's good to embrace the diversity. Probably nobody is normal on all dimensions, right? It would be quite atypical to be typical in all dimensions. So and that's something that we can really embrace and, yeah, not be scared of.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, what does normal even mean? Like, we have very little to ascertain a meaning for what normal means. There are children who develop in one way, children developing slightly differently from most. But again, I would really try to avoid seeing anything in black or white terms, seeing each child for what they are, the strengths of that child, the difficulties they're facing. And I think removing a focus on being like everybody else is really helpful in most situations.
Absolutely. And this seems to be reflected also in what our audience feels, because when we ask, do you see the differences of your child as strengths or as weakness, we have a 100% of strength. So it's nice. I think it's getting more accepted and it's getting more out there that diversity is a good thing. I think sometimes it's easier said than done. Sometimes it's easier to have, I don't know, boys that love football, which I have 4 boys. None of them loves football. Sometimes my friend with boys who love football have it so easy. It's just like, oh, go there. You can do carpooling. You can, like, there is a lot of it's practical to be part of a big mass of people. There is a lot of things that become possible. I mean, sometimes it's very nice to go with the flow, and we shouldn't, if we happen to be in the flow, yeah, that's fantastic. But yeah, also being outside of the flow is a nice place to be and a very rich place to be.
Yes, and I think there's been a lot more messages about this sent to children, like like there are books of brave women who changed the world. There's a book about boys who dare to be different. I think that message is really coming across to children also, that there's not a single way of being. That we should really embrace diversity and the individual characteristic of each person.
Yeah.
Like a world where everybody's the same, it would be just so boring.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, if you had to sum it up, what would you say are the tools that you have learned from deaf population that can be useful to all parents? If you had to kind of find 2 or 3 like really tangible tips.
So I would say that one thing that that was very inspiring working with deaf parents was to observe parent-child interaction and the creativity that there is in non-auditory means of communication. So I think as parents, speaking and singing comes really naturally. But deaf parents sometimes have very creative way of communicating with a hearing child who could receive an audio message, but the parent is not that comfortable using their voice, etc. So they have very, very creative way of communicating, and a visual. I have a video I'd like to show you actually. Let's see if that works. Oh, that doesn't work. Oh, I can't show you. So I'll try to describe what is in that video. It's a deaf dad interacting with a little girl and their segment at different age, from 6 months to 9 months, I think. And he's presenting a picture book, and there's sign language. There's a lot of gesture, a lot of facial expression. That is also using the baby's body to model some sign language, some gesture, some actions for the character. It's absolutely fantastic to watch. And it's a perfectly silent interaction, but the baby's really engaged, full vision. Like you can see already on this picture, the interest on the child's face. And so the child's gaze is really locked on the father, and there's a lot of giggling and enjoyment. So I would say this is the main lesson I've learned from deaf parents, is to watch them interact using visual communication and tactile communication as well.
Wow, yeah, that's very nice. Do you think you could send us? Is that available on YouTube? Freely available? That we could put it on the comments, so that if someone wants to watch it,
Oh yes, I can do that.
the movie, that would be lovely. Yeah, if you can send it to us. Yeah, so I think with that we get to the end of our chat. Thank you so much for shining a light on this population that, as you say, we don't really pay much attention to in science, but also maybe then that's a reflection of what happens then out there in society. So thank you for shining that light, and thank you for building the bridge towards us and what it means to other parents that might not experience the same situation, but that can really be inspired from it. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was really interesting to hear what your audience had to say about the questions as well.
Yes, thank you everyone for sending in your answers and for listening today. And of course, if you have questions, you can always leave them in the comments, and we're going to read them and pass them on to Evelyne and get back to you with answers. Thank you so much. Thank you also for organizing with us the Weird and Wonderful World of Children 2023-24 edition. Hopefully see you next year with a new edition.
Sounds great. I'm excited about it already.
Thank you very much, and all the best.
Thank you. See
Bye.
you soon. Bye-bye.